Harlem, 1943. A brownstone basement on 132nd Street. Wooden crates stacked floor to ceiling. Stenciled markings. U.S. Army. Serial numbers, shipping codes, military logistics stamps still visible on the wood. Open one crate, Thompson submachine guns. 12 units, Cosmoline still fresh. Open another, M1 Garand rifles. Standard issue for infantry fighting in Europe. Another crate, hand grenades, M2 fragmentation type, bazooka rounds, 45 caliber ammunition by the thousand. This isn't a military depot, it's a criminal operation, and standing in the center, clipboard in hand, is Bumpy Johnson, not looting. Cataloging, recording serial numbers, checking condition, pricing inventory. Operating like a quartermaster, not a thief. Above ground, Harlem mothers hang gold star flags in windows. Sons killed at Anzio. Brothers dead in the Pacific. The neighborhood bleeds for the war effort. Below ground, their weapons are being sold for profit. The scale doesn't make sense. Enough firepower to arm a battalion. Automatic weapons, explosives, military-grade ordnance. In the hands of a single crime boss. While the War Department reports critical shortages overseas, soldiers rationing ammunition, units waiting for resupply, Harlem has an arsenal that rivals National Guard armories. The numbers are staggering. FBI reports later estimated, Bumpy controlled access to thousands of diverted military weapons during the war years. Weapons that should have been on ships to Europe. Weapons American soldiers were dying without. How does this happen? How does a black man in segregated 1940s America, barred from most legitimate economic activity, surveilled by police, operating in a neighborhood under constant pressure, control more military weapons than most state militias? The answer isn't in Harlem. It's in the war itself. And in the systems that war broke open. The wartime economic divide, white America was getting rich. Defense contracts flooded factories across the nation. Boeing, Lockheed, General Motors, converting from civilian production to military manufacturing. Overtime wages. Double shifts. Triple shifts. Workers pulling down money they'd never seen during the Depression. War bonds. Savings accounts. The American economy roaring back to life on the fuel of global conflict. Unemployment dropped to record lows. Housing construction boomed near defense plants. The middle class expanded. White workers who'd been unemployed in 1940 were buying houses by 1943. The war was a tease program, a wealth transfer, an economic miracle. For white Americans, Harlem told a different story. Black workers were last hired, first fired at defense plants. Patriotic duty propaganda filled newspapers and radio. Everyone must contribute to the war effort. But when black men showed up at factory gates, they were turned away. No positions available. Not hiring your kind. And sometimes they didn't bother with excuses, just pointed to whites only signs that violated executive orders everyone ignored. The numbers were brutal. Harlem's unemployment rate hovered at 30%, even as the nation mobilized for total war. 30% yet. While white neighborhoods celebrated full employment and rising wages, Harlem families couldn't get hired to build the weapons their sons would carry overseas. Rationing created a two-tier system. Sugar, meat, gasoline, rubber, all restricted for the war effort. In theory, everyone sacrificed equally. In practice, wealthy whites bypassed shortages through connections, country club memberships, business relationships, a word to the right distributor. They never went without. Poor black families couldn't access legal channels even when they had money. Ration cards didn't matter if stores in your neighborhood never got shipments. Cash didn't matter if suppliers refused to serve black customers. The system was designed to distribute scarcity, but it distributed it unequally. The irony was suffocating. Black men were dying in segregated units overseas. The 92nd Infantry Division in Italy, the 761st Tank Battalion in France, fighting and bleeding for democracy. While their mothers, wives, and children in Harlem starved, locked out of the wartime prosperity their sacrifice was supposedly defending. Gold Star flags in Harlem windows, sons dead at Anzio. And their families couldn't get hired at the factory making the rifles that should have kept them alive. The survival calculation became simple. Brutal, but simple. When the legitimate economy is closed, the illegitimate economy becomes the rational choice. Not a moral choice. Not a proud choice. But the only choice that puts food on the table. Bumpy Johnson didn't create that calculation. America did. He just understood it better than anyone else. The scale of America's wartime production was unprecedented in human history. 310,000 aircraft, 88,000 tanks, 4 million trucks, billion rounds of ammunition, factories running 24 hours, assembly lines that never stopped, ships leaving ports every day loaded with equipment bound for Europe and the Pacific. The sheer volume created chaos, and chaos created opportunity. You can't track every item when you're producing millions. Serial numbers blur. Manifests get rushed. Inventory systems break down under the pressure of wartime urgency. The military needed speed over accuracy. Get weapons to the front. Count later. That gap between production and accountability was where fortunes were made. New York City was the critical vulnerability point. The Port of New York handled 60% of all European-bound military cargo. Thousands of tons daily. The Brooklyn Navy Yard. The Manhattan Piers. Red Hook. Cargo moved from factories to rail yards to warehouses to ships. Every transfer point was a potential leakage point, and the system was overwhelmed. Dock workers, moving crates they didn't have time to inspect. Rail yard crews rushing shipments with incomplete manifests. Supply depots stacking material faster than they could catalog it. The pressure was relentless. Get it moving, get it overseas, win the war. Accuracy was a luxury no one could afford. The insider network formed organically. Corrupt quartermaster officers saw the opportunity first. They controlled the paperwork. A crate of rifles becomes a crate of medical supplies on paper. An ammunition shipment shows delivered when it never left the warehouse. Surpluses that were never surplus, just diverted before anyone counted. Dock workers participated because they were desperate. Wartime inflation ate their fixed wages. Their families struggled while executives profited. The same system that locked them out of advancement now needed their labor. Some saw it as taking what they were owed. Rail workers, warehouse staff, truckers, each layer had access. Each layer had motive. The racial angle made recruitment easy. Black dock workers and warehouse staff handled military cargo, but were systematically excluded from supervisory positions, better wages, or respect. They watched white workers get promoted. They heard the patriotic duty speeches while being treated as expendable labor. That created resentment. And resentment created a recruitment pool. When someone approached a black warehouse worker about diverting a weapons shipment, the calculation wasn't complicated. This system exploits you. It underpays you. It will discard you when the war ends. Why protect it? The weapons flowed through predictable patterns. M1 carbines fell off trucks during transport from depots to docks. Shipping manifests said 30 crates loaded. 28 arrived. The missing 2? Already in Harlem by the time anyone noticed the discrepancy. Crates marked medical supplies, or machine parts, contained Thompson submachine guns. The paperwork was perfect, because quartermaster officers created it. No one opened every crate. Trust the manifest. Keep it moving. Ammunition surpluses were diverted before ever reaching ships. A depot reports excess inventory. Standard procedure. Redistribute to other units. Except the redistribution goes to Bumpy's warehouses instead of other military bases. On paper, it's accounted for. In reality, it's gone. Bumpy's genius wasn't theft. It was positioning. He didn't break into military facilities. He didn't hijack trucks. He offered to protect military shipments passing through Harlem. Pay him, and your cargo reaches the docks intact. Don't pay, and things go missing. Essentially, he controlled the theft routes. Every weapon diverted in his territory went through his network or didn't get diverted at all. He became the middleman who took a percentage of every transaction. The dock worker who steals a crate doesn't know where to sell military weapons. Bumpy does. The corrupt officer who diverts a shipment needs distribution. Bumpy has it. He built a vertical monopoly on military equipment diversion in Harlem. This was the perfect storm. Four forces converging. Military production at unprecedented scale made tracking impossible. You can't maintain inventory accuracy when you're producing thousands of weapons daily and shipping them under wartime urgency. The system traded accountability for speed. Systemic racism created workers with access but no loyalty. Black laborers handled the weapons, loaded the trucks, worked the warehouses. But the system that employed them also oppressed them. Why protect equipment going to a war effort that excludes your community from its prosperity? Economic desperation in Harlem created ready markets. Diverted weapons needed buyers. Harlem had them. Shop owners wanting protection. Numbers runners needing enforcement capability. Residents who couldn't trust police. Cash-ready customers for military-grade firearms. Bumpy's existing organizational structure gave him coordination capacity. He already ran Harlem's numbers racket with discipline and logistics. Adding weapons distribution just required applying the same systems. He had the infrastructure, the personnel, trust networks, the distribution channels. The weapons flowed because the system was designed to fail. Not intentionally, but inevitably. When you combine massive production volume, systemic oppression, economic desperation, and sophisticated criminal organization, you don't get theft. You get industry. Bumpy didn't exploit a weakness. He built a business on a structural flaw America created and refused to fix. The weapons in that Harlem basement didn't fall from the sky. They walked out of the American military supply chain with the help of Americans who decided the system didn't deserve their loyalty. And they were probably right. The organizational structure Bumpy didn't run a gang. He ran a logistics operation. The structure was hub and spoke. Bumpy at the center. Lieutenants radiating outward, each controlling a specific acquisition channel. One lieutenant owned the docks. Another controlled rail yard operations. A third managed relationships with corrupt military base personnel. Specialized roles. Clear territories. No overlap. This prevented any single point of failure. If authorities compromised one channel, the others continued operating. If one lieutenant got arrested, he only knew his piece of the operation, not the whole network. Weapon specialization was embedded throughout. Different crews handled different categories. Pistols and revolvers, high volume, easy storage, fast turnover. Rifles, medium volume, required more space, different buyer profile. Automatic weapons, low volume, high value, extreme security. Explosives, separate storage, specialized handling, limited distribution. Each category required different expertise. Storage temperatures, maintenance protocols, transportation methods. Bumpy assigned crews based on capability, not just loyalty. The inventory system operated like a military armory. Actual ledgers. Serial numbers recorded. Ammunition counts tracked. Condition reports: new, good, fair, poor. Weapons weren't just stockpiled. They were cataloged, maintained, rotated to prevent degradation. FBI reports from later raids described finding military-grade inventory management in Bumpy's operations. Organized, systematic, professional. Security was layered and paranoid. Weapons never stored in one location. Multiple safe houses across Harlem. Rotating guards. Entry protocols. Perimeter security that mimicked military installations. Anyone approaching a storage site was observed blocks away. Contingency plans if a location was compromised. Pre-positioned transport. Alternate storage. Communication protocols. The distribution network was exclusive and controlled. Bumpy didn't sell to just anyone. Buyers were vetted. Backgrounds checked. References required. Once approved, transactions were tracked. Who bought what weapon, when, for what price? This created accountability in an illegal market. It also gave Bumpy intelligence. He knew who was armed. With what? Where weapons moved in Harlem's economy. The genius innovation: weapon rental. Instead of selling a Thompson submachine gun for $200, Bumpy rented it for $50 a week. The buyer got firepower without major capital outlay. Bumpy got recurring revenue, and the weapon returned to his control. If someone stopped paying, he knew exactly which weapon to reclaim and who had it. This transformed weapons from commodities into assets under continuous management. The operational methods. The acquisition timing was surgical. Bumpy's informants inside military supply chains provided advance intelligence. Shipment schedules. Cargo contents. Security protocols. Troop rotations that created gaps in warehouse coverage. Thefts were coordinated to match legitimate military chaos. When a major shipment moved through multiple transfer points in 24 hours, weapons vanished in the confusion. Paperwork showed discrepancies days later, too late to track where the gap occurred. The transport system hid in plain sight. Funeral homes moved weapons in caskets. Laundry services transported rifles and hampers of dirty linens. Delivery trucks for groceries, coal, ice, all doubled as weapons couriers. Harlem's legitimate economy became the cover for military hardware distribution. No one stops a hearse. No one inspects laundry baskets too closely. Storage innovation prevented detection. Bumpy converted brownstone basements into climate-controlled arsenals. Dehumidifiers prevented rust. Temperature regulation stopped ammunition degradation. Proper maintenance meant weapons stayed functional and looked new, not old stolen goods that could be traced by condition. The pricing strategy positioned Bumpy as premium supplier. He charged more than Italian mafia weapons dealers, but he guaranteed quality and quantity. M1 Garands in perfect condition. Thompson submachine guns that actually worked. Ammunition that fired reliably. When mafia suppliers offered inferior pistols and questionable ammunition, Bumpy delivered military-grade equipment. Premium pricing for premium product. He wasn't competing on he competed on reliability. The military intelligence network was sophisticated. Informants weren't just corrupt soldiers stealing weapons. They were strategic assets, providing operational intelligence. Which bases had lax security? Which officers were vulnerable to recruitment? When inventory audits happened, what investigative patterns to avoid? This intelligence gave Bumpy time. Warning before crackdowns. Advance notice of increased scrutiny. The ability to shift operations before authorities focused attention. The competitive advantage was qualitative monopoly. While other criminals dealt in pistols and shotguns, weapons available through normal criminal channels. Bumpy controlled automatic weapons and explosives. Military-grade hardware unavailable elsewhere. This created market dominance not through volume but through unique inventory. The protection service was circular economics. Bumpy sold weapons to Harlem shop owners for self-defense against crime he partially controlled. He created the threat and sold the solution, simultaneously generating demand and supply. Shop owners paid for weapons to protect against violence that weapons proliferation enabled. The political angle transformed weapons into leverage. Harlem politicians who cooperated received protection. Those who didn't faced armed opponents. Police who looked away got payoffs. Those who investigated found their informants outgunned. Bumpy didn't just control weapons. He controlled who had access to force in Harlem. This was the system's true innovation. Bumpy didn't operate like a typical fence receiving stolen goods and reselling them. He created vertical integration, controlling acquisition, storage, distribution, and end use. He applied military logistics principles to criminal enterprise. He transformed weapons from stolen goods into strategic assets that gave him political and territorial control. The Italian mafia dealt in weapons as commodities. Bumpy weaponized them as instruments of power. That's how a crime boss becomes a warlord. Not through violence, through logistics. The setup. Summer 1945. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. August 15, 1945. Japan surrenders. The war is over, and Bumpy Johnson's empire is now a ticking bomb. The military begins comprehensive inventory audits. Accountants replacing generals. Peacetime means accountability. The War Department discovers what everyone ignored during the urgency of wartime: massive weapons losses. Thousands of rifles, submachine guns, crates of ammunition, simply gone. Not destroyed in combat. Not lost to enemy action. Just vanished from supply chains. Congress demands answers. Too many Gold Star mothers asking the wrong questions. Why did my son die with ammunition shortages while criminals stockpiled arsenals? Hearings scheduled. Inspector General investigations launched. Public pressure mounting. The FBI shifts priorities. Wartime espionage is over. German spies and saboteurs no longer the threat. Domestic black markets become the focus. Agents reassigned. Resources redirected. The same investigative machinery that hunted enemy agents now hunts weapons traffickers. And Bumpy is sitting on the largest civilian weapons stockpile in America. Worth millions. And now radioactive. Every weapon in those basements is evidence. Every serial number a potential federal charge. Every transaction a link in a conspiracy case. What was opportunity 6 months ago is now existential threat. The walls are closing in. The dilemma, the position is impossible. Every option leads to disaster. Can't sell the weapons. Too much heat. Every buyer is a potential informant. Every transaction a chance for federal surveillance to catch the exchange. Moving product now draws exactly the attention Bumpy needs to avoid. Can't keep them. The FBI is closing in. Informants talking. Search warrants coming. It's not if they find the arsenals, it's when. And when they do, the serial numbers will connect to military theft. Federal charges. Decades in prison. Can't destroy them. Millions of dollars in inventory. Power translated into hardware. Destroying the weapons means destroying the foundation of his control. And how do you destroy that volume without drawing attention? Dumping in the river risks discovery. Burning creates smoke and questions. Can't return them. That's admission of guilt. Proof of the entire operation. Walking into federal prosecution voluntarily. No good options. just degrees of catastrophe. The loyalty network fractures under pressure. Corrupt military contacts who provided access now want protection money or they'll cooperate with investigators. They're facing courts-martial. They need someone to blame. Bumpy is the obvious target. Pay them or they talk. But paying creates more evidence. The Italian mafia sees vulnerability and smells blood. Bumpy's distracted, dealing with federal heat. His weapons empire, the source of his competitive advantage, is now his weakness. They're preparing to move on Harlem territory while he's fighting to avoid prison. Two-front war, federal investigation and territorial challenge. The community tension adds another pressure point. Harlem residents are exhausted. Gun violence has spiked. Weapons proliferation that Bumpy enabled is destroying neighborhoods. Some residents, tired of the bloodshed, call for cooperation with authorities. The community that protected him is fracturing. Internal conflict splits his organization. Lieutenants arguing. Some want to go deeper underground, hide the weapons better, wait out the heat, maintain the empire. Others want to cut deals with the FBI, cooperate, take reduced sentences, save themselves. The discipline that made the operation effective is eroding under stress. The federal squeeze is systematic. FBI agents offering immunity deals. Anyone who provides evidence against the top of the supply chain walks free, meaning everyone under Bumpy can save themselves by giving him up. The entire organizational structure becomes a liability. Every person who knows anything is a potential witness. The circle tightens daily. The critical decision. Bumpy faces the choice. Abandon the weapons empire, lose power, lose revenue, lose the competitive advantage that made him dominant. Or fight to maintain it, risk federal prosecution, territory loss, potential death. The deeper question cuts through the tactical concerns. Was this ever sustainable? Was the weapons operation a strategic power move or a dangerous addiction to wartime opportunity that should have been temporary? Wartime chaos created the opening. But the war is over. The chaos is ending. And what worked in wartime becomes a trap in peace. The moment of clarity arrives not dramatically, but quietly. Bumpy realizes the weapons that made him powerful are now making him vulnerable. Military hardware draws federal heat that street guns never did. The FBI doesn't care about pistols in Harlem. They care about stolen military arsenals. The decision isn't a shootout. It's a calculated retreat. Quietly liquidate the arsenal through carefully selected channels. Weapons move out of Harlem in controlled flows. Some sold to buyers far from federal focus. Some hidden in long-term storage. Some simply disappear. Maintain the illusion of control while systematically dismantling the empire. Not surrender. Strategic withdrawal. The weight. This isn't heroism or villainy. It's recognition. Knowing when temporary opportunity becomes permanent liability. The tragedy echoes through Harlem. Veterans return home from Europe and the Pacific. They see weapons they carried in combat. M1 Garens. Thompson submachine guns. Now used in street violence. The tools that defeated fascism are killing teenagers in Harlem. Their sacrifice perverted into neighborhood destruction. Families destroyed. Not by enemy fire, but by diverted American weapons that should have stayed in military hands. Bumpy built power on tragedy. Wartime chaos, systemic racism, economic desperation. He exploited all of it brilliantly. But now he must navigate tragedy's end. The chaos that created opportunity is resolving. And the structures built on chaos can't survive order's return. The weapons made him powerful. And the weapons will take everything if he doesn't let them go. That's the price. Power built on temporary conditions is always temporary itself. The immediate aftermath, the weapons didn't disappear. They scattered. Some were seized in federal raids. Evidence rooms, filled with M1 Garans, and Thompson's submachine guns marked with military serial numbers. Proof of the largest wartime black market operation in American history. Court cases. Headlines. Scandal. Some disappeared into long-term storage, hidden in Harlem basements and upstate warehouses. Waiting. Emerging years later when the heat cooled. Weapons from 1943 surfacing in 1952 crimes. Military hardware with a decade of rust, but still functional. Some fueled Harlem gang violence for decades. Proliferation creates cycles. The weapons Bumpy distributed in the 1940s armed the territorial wars of the 1950s and 60s. Automatic weapons in civilian hands don't just disappear when their original purpose ends. The federal crackdown became national scandal. Congressional hearings exposed systemic military supply corruption. Dozens of prosecutions. Corrupt quartermaster officers court-martialed. Dock workers imprisoned. The scale of theft shocked a nation that believed its wartime mobilization was heroic and pure. Bumpy adapted. He always did. Shifting from weapons to narcotics. One black market to another. The same organizational skills, logistics expertise, and distribution networks, just different product. The empire transformed but didn't fall. The community paid the cost. Harlem's murder rate in the late 1940s was partially attributable to the weapons proliferation Bumpy enabled. Young men armed with military-grade hardware. Disputes that should have been fistfights became shootings. Neighborhoods turned into war zones. The bitter irony consumed everything. Weapons meant to liberate Europe from fascism instead enforced tyranny in Harlem's streets. Tools of freedom became instruments of oppression. American soldiers died with ammunition shortages while their weapons killed black teenagers at home. Liberation abroad. Destruction at home. Same weapons. Different victims. The universal truth and modern parallel. The pattern didn't end with Vote Brut. It repeated. It's still repeating. Vietnam created heroin pipelines. American military presence in Southeast Asia opened trafficking routes that destroyed urban communities back home. Afghanistan and opium, same story, different decade. Iraq and missing military equipment flowing to insurgents and black markets. Every American war creates criminal opportunities. The scale and chaos of wartime economies make corruption inevitable. You can't move billions in equipment and maintain accountability. Speed beats accuracy. Urgency beats oversight. And gaps between production and tracking become fortunes for those positioned to exploit them. This is the systemic lesson. War economies are inherently corrupt. Not because people are evil, but because the structure guarantees it. When you prioritize volume and speed over accuracy and accountability, you create theft-friendly systems. Add systemic racism that excludes communities from legitimate prosperity, and you create recruitment pools for diversion schemes. The moral complexity refuses easy answers. Bumpy's weapons operation was a rational response to systemic exclusion. Black workers denied advancement. Black communities locked out of wartime prosperity. Black soldiers dying for a country that oppressed them. In that context, diverting military weapons is logical. But rationality doesn't eliminate harm caused. Harlem families destroyed by gun violence don't care that the proliferation made economic sense. The question of responsibility cuts both ways. Who bears more guilt? The black crime boss who seized opportunity created by systemic racism? Or the white power structure that created the opportunity through racism and war profiteering? Bumpy exploited the gap. But America created the gap. Both are guilty. Neither is solely responsible. That's the complexity systems create. The contemporary resonance is haunting. Modern military equipment losses in Iraq and Afghanistan reach billions of dollars. weapons, vehicles, technology, vanished. Some to insurgents, some to black markets. The Pentagon can't account for it. The same institutional failures that enabled Bumpy in the 1940s enable trafficking today. Guns flow from legal to illegal markets continuously. Military-grade weapons lost in transport. Law enforcement equipment diverted. The cycles continue because the systems haven't changed. We still prioritize speed over accountability. We still create economic desperation that makes crime rational. We still act surprised when the predictable happens. The enduring questions have no satisfying answers. Could Bumpy have achieved power without exploiting wartime chaos? Probably not. Legitimate pathways were systematically closed. Did his weapons empire protect Harlem from external threats, or make it more dangerous? Both. He challenged Italian mafia control while arming violence within the community. Is using the enemy's tools, corruption, violence, to fight the enemy a victory or a defeat? That depends on who's left standing when it's over. The final image, an M1 Garand rifle. Serial number traced to a 1943 shipment meant for the 92nd Infantry Division in Italy. It never made it to Europe. Diverted somewhere between a Brooklyn warehouse and the docks. Sold through Bumpy's network. Changed hands multiple times. Ended up used in a 1949 shooting that killed a 16-year-old in Harlem. The weapon as metaphor. Tools of liberation becoming instruments of oppression. The rifle that should have freed Europe instead enslaved a community to cycles of violence. The ultimate cost isn't just lives lost. It's community trust destroyed when survival requires becoming what you fight against. When systemic oppression makes crime rational, everyone loses. The criminal, the community, the victims. Everyone except the system that created the conditions. Bumpy Johnson's wartime weapons empire reveals an uncomfortable truth. America's wars create as much destruction at home through corruption and opportunity as they do abroad through combat. The weapons that made him powerful came at a price paid by his own community. A price still being calculated decades later in cycles of violence those weapons enabled. The war ended in 1945. The weapons are still killing.